When I saw the way you write, Xiaowei, about Tacnode and the problems that you're solving, it didn't take any time for someone like me that loves the below the waterline enterprise AI infrastructure, data infrastructure platforms, to just literally make a beeline. And I'm so impressed by you and your team and the company you've built.
Automated systems make orders of magnitude more decisions than humans, like often can be thousands of decisions a second instead of just a few decisions a day all at once. We should have correctness as a first principle. Design a system around what must be true at decision time, the correctness contracts, and add functionalities to it without breaking it.
The contextual understanding for a human of a business situation, right? We as humans can understand context rather quickly. We got the supercomputer, the quantum thing in our heads. All right, here we go. AI with Alec. This is one of those interviews that come like end of March. I didn't know you guys yet. I didn't know Tacnode. I didn't know Xiaowei. But I tell you, when I walked into the FinTech conference, meetup conference out in Las Vegas, end of March, on the Sunday before the conference started, I was fortunate enough to walk in and grab my gift bag, and in there's one thing. It's a Forrester research report co-branded by you guys. And I went to a great Mexican restaurant. I sat down, opened it up end to end. When I saw Context Lake and when I saw the way you write, Xiaowei, about Tacnode and the problems that you're solving, it didn't take any time for someone like me that loves the below the waterline enterprise AI infrastructure, data infrastructure platforms, to just literally make a beeline. As you know, Monday morning when those doors opened, I came looking for you guys, and I'm so impressed by you and your team and the company you've built. So without further delay, I'll be quiet, but I want to introduce my audience to Xiaowei Jiang, who is the founder and CEO of Tacnode, which anyone who's watching this, who's already heard me, brag about you guys, this is the guy and this is the company, and here we go. So thanks for joining us, and welcome to the party.
Thanks, Alec. Glad to be here.
Well, let's get started. So one of the things you and I spoke about, out in Las Vegas is when it comes to context, let's just start there and keep it at high level for a second. But the contextual understanding for a human of a business situation, right? We as humans can understand context rather quickly. We got the supercomputer, the quantum thing in our heads. And so if somebody starts to explain a business situation to me, or you and I start talking about business and whatnot, it's rather straightforward for us as humans to understand context. But when you try to introduce context into AI infrastructure and ultimately AI agents and things using legacy infrastructure, right? The stuff that was born and created well south of 3-4 years ago, there are gaps that start to develop. And I wonder if maybe you might want to kind of open it up, Xiaowei, by just talking a little bit about what is the problem that you're looking to solve, and how do you tend to communicate that, let's say, to a non-technical senior Fortune 500 leader of a TMT company, right? So technology, media, telecom, super creative, awesome, that maybe doesn't understand what we can geek out on, which we will get to. But how do you kind of explain it to non-technical senior leaders using the technology, media, telecom space as a territory to start exploring this?
Let me give it a try. So we are building the infrastructure layer that makes sure your AI always have the right context at the moment it needs to make decisions. So the reason it matters, we noticed a lot of AI failures that frustrates enterprise teams are the ones that looks like a model is broken, but in reality, it's not the model. It's almost always come down to one of three things. First thing is sometimes AI makes something up because it was missing context. Second thing is AI contradicted with itself because it was reading conflicting information from different systems. And all the AI make a wrong decision because it was acting on information which was no longer true. Initially, it will feel like something is broken in the model, but these are not really model problems. They are context problems. Your AI is always only as good as the context it can see. So Tacnode is the infrastructure layer that makes sure your AI is always having the full picture. It's always get the complete, consistent current context at the time when it needs to make decisions.
1,000%. And one of the things that's so powerful about how elegantly you explained that is that for a non-technical senior business leader, they can nod their head and say, oh yeah, without context, you can't make decisions, right? Like there's some people think, finance is math, but in reality, it's all about logic and assumptions and which ones to pay attention to and how to put things together. Shout out Stevie Schwartzman, who would love to know about Tacnode if he doesn't already, by the way. And what I would love for you to kind of maybe help us understand is that there are probably a fair amount of people that are probably thinking to themselves, well, maybe, but I've got, AWS and or GCP, and I've got a Snowflake instance or a Databricks, and I think we're good to go, right? We don't need to worry, CEO, like we've got this. And I'm going to set you up for that one, right? Is like not to take shots at Snowflake or Databricks, not that we're in the business of that in any way, shape, or form. Great companies, but could you help us now? You can step in anything you want, technical or otherwise, but can you start to unpack that a little bit of like, why is that problem of context so difficult for today's AI agents and those three problems that you described, it not being the model, of course? And what are some of the gaps and limitations of current infrastructure that's in place in these territories? And help us understand that a little bit from your perspective.
Yeah, so before that, I can give my personal experience in dealing with that. So in the last few months, I was starting to develop a root cause, root analysis agent. So we get all these alerts in production. We want an agent to look at the alert, analyze it, find the root cause. So I developed an agent for that. What I noticed a few interesting things. First, when the agent couldn't retrieve telemetry data, it didn't say, I don't know. It just generated plausible sounding root cause that couldn't be confirmed. Right? And when we have conflicting instructions across runbooks, documentations, the agent didn't flag the conflict. It just took the easy way out to come up with a root cause that sounds right. And you have no idea that it has seen such a conflict. And when the documentation was outdated, the agent is very happy to jump to a wrong conclusion because that's what the document said, but it didn't realize it's outdated. So that was my personal experience. All these context problems are hurting the quality and the decision your agency is making. So we come back to your question regarding the current, why isn't the current technical stack good enough? The data stack and most companies are running today, they are based on data lakehouses, message queues, stream processors, feature stores, or search engines. These were designed and built when human was the main consumers of data. Humans are slow. They make discrete decisions with long delay between these decisions. That gives pipelines time to catch up, your cache time to refresh, and your systems time to converge. The stack worked because humans were forgiving. When you start working on using AI and agents to make decisions, to make automated decisions, all these assumptions change simultaneously.
Yeah.
The first thing is concurrency. Automated systems make orders of magnitude more decisions than humans, like often can be thousands of decisions a second instead of just a few decisions a day or at once. The second is the latency requirement is very different. When there is no human in the loop, your system becomes the bottleneck. So every millisecond you improve in your infrastructure can directly translate into your business outcome in fraud, in credit, or in personalization. And third thing is about consistency. AI systems have very little tolerance in terms of conflicting signals. A human being can notice something feels off and pause. An automated decision commit regardless, confidently wrong, without knowing it was acting on the wrong information. So the existing stack was not built to guarantee the correctness of that concurrency and latency. Tacnode was built to solve this problem.
Wow. Let me ask you a question. So one of the things you said in there, which I think is just so fascinating, and for those that haven't yet gotten there, you will very quickly, right? This idea that the existing stack was built for humans. So human usage, humans to use, et cetera, and to be involved. And obviously where we're going is, agents become the users and they're really fast and they have generally speaking, photographic memories, etc. I'm curious, when did you start to realize and develop conviction around that transition of going from systems built for humans to systems built for AI agents and AI? And how did that develop in your mind back before you were sold on it, right?
So I got this idea long before agent even existed, was trying to solve the real-time personalization and recommendation system for e-commerce using classical machine learning models. And even with these machine learning models, you realize having access to the most recent data, most accurate data, can make a huge difference in the impact. And what happened in the last couple of years is large language model took off and agents is everywhere. And then I realized this automated decision is not just going to be used in very limited cases. It's going to be everywhere. So solving the same problem for agents, the way we solved for classical AI, is going to have a much larger impact.
Do you think it's fair to, and again, I'm oversimplifying, so you got to keep me honest, but do you think it's fair to suggest that we're in the very early stages of a lot of infrastructure? I'm not going to say all, but a lot of infrastructure having to be rebuilt essentially, or do you see it a different way?
I think that's a very fair statement. So the infrastructure we built today was for a very different purpose. So it's modern infrastructure. I think it's almost, we need to think about how the product was built, right? It's modern infrastructure from end to end. Think about what changes when an agent becomes the primary user of your product instead of human. So this changes a lot. The volume changes. The agent will make orders of magnitude of more requests to your service. Human, for example, might log into a CRM system a few times a day. Agent might query it thousands of times in an hour. The traffic model is completely different. The second thing is for this interaction pattern, it's different. The surface of the classical software product is about interface, navigation, dashboards, visualization, all these things. They were designed for human beings to consume data and to understand it. Agents don't need any of that. They prefer structured data. They prefer API than UI. They prefer information to be presented in a machine-readable format. A beautiful UI is kind of worthless to agent because it's probably not even looking at the UI. So this means and the whole landscape of the software industry is shifting, remote shifts.
Keep going. I rudely almost interrupt you. Keep going.
Yeah. So a product defensibility used to come from your experience, how well it presented the information to a human, how intuitive the workflow is, how polished your design is. But in agent-first world, none of this is defensible. What's defensible is what you know, your domain data, your proprietary signals, the depth of context only you can provide. We are in the very early stages. Like the services that can thrive in this new agent era won't be the ones that has the best UI. They will be the ones with the most complete, highest quality context about their domain, because that's what agent consumes. So we are in the perfect place when this evolution is taking off. We have the opportunity to define how it looks like.
I mean, 1,000%. I smile like, because I'm trying my best not to interrupt you as I get excited when you say things. I try to write them down so I remember to go back to them and not be rude to interrupt you. But you know, that's a fantastic explanation. And I wonder if it might make sense to think about what would be, so I'll give you an example. And I mentioned this to Boyd Stowe, shout out Boyd, when I met him out in Las Vegas at the FinTech meetup. And I said, you know, I'm a guy that I consume an enormous amount of music, you know, in part because it helps me focus. So when I'm doing deep work, I'm always listening to music. I listen to it all the time. And one of the things I said to him, I said, you know, I'm so curious for someone like me who listens to, let's say, 3 to 5 hours of music a day at least, and then you can do the math. I always wonder why there aren't more better patterns recognized between the music I consume and artists I haven't yet been exposed to. and how that could be an extraordinary opportunity for people in the business of music and other dimensions. And I just wonder, Xiaowei, if there's like an example you might be able to give, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I've got one that I've heard from another territory tied to this that I can throw out there too to get you to react to it. But where does this take the user experience for the human that's going to be so much different and better than the way it is today? I'm just going to ask that question, and maybe in the territory of the things we're passionate about, like music and film and content and, whatever the case may be.
Sure. Yeah, I think you just gave a very good example. It's about personalization, about understanding you, understanding your behavior. So we recommend the best thing, music that best fits your needs. So another example is in e-commerce when you're doing recommendations. You go to Amazon, you bought some baby crib. At that moment, we should be able to know you are getting a new family member. So we can recommend other baby products like baby formulas or these things to you before you even check out. So that gives you better experience. Of course, it also gives the e-commerce company better revenue. So that's just another example we can do. If we understand the context, we know what you did and use this information to tailor your experience, it will be much better.
Without question. So I'm gonna take that a couple steps further selfishly. So I just recently discovered an artist named Taylor Childers, and I had never heard of him before. I don't know if there was a relationship that the system understood around all these artists that Rick Rubin produces, big music producer, shout out Big Rick. But I was fortunate enough to happen to look at my computer as this song was going on. And before I went skip, I saw Rick in the background of his little video. And so I'm like, oh, whoa, is Rick Rubin, produced artist? I'll give it a shot. And that's as simple a thing to describe, but at scale, right? So to your point about e-commerce, I mean, what we're talking about here is suggesting at an infinite scale, much, much, much more useful within e-commerce products, services, digital services, what have you. I have to imagine when you start talking to decently technical folks within that community, they start to connect the dots and unpack it. But my question for you is, how do these conversations with prospective clients who haven't yet heard of Tacnode typically go when you're helping them understand the power of this recommendation system and engine in relation to helping them recalibrate their previous assumptions about what was actually possible or not possible with legacy infrastructure?
Yeah. So a lot of the customers we talk to, their stack is still built on top of a data lakehouse. So what happens is when they want to make a good recommendation, the data is actually will go to the lakehouse, your behavior data. Every click you did, every impression you had, eventually goes to the data lakehouse. But it gets there through a pipeline. The pipeline takes time to propagate. So when your AI makes a decision, the data it needs often have not arrived, even though it will eventually arrive. But if that arrives after the customer checked out, it doesn't help. So that's the most typical problem we are seeing. So in certain cases, there is a second problem that's more subtle, which is even when the data does arrive, it comes from multiple different systems. Oh, yeah. For example, each system will have its own pipeline, and each system have its own lag. So when AI reads the account balance from one system, a transaction velocity from another, and behavior signals from third, each one of these systems offer a different, was looking at data in a different moment in time. Your AI is actually reasoning from a snapshot that never existed in the world. And as a result, you may not be able to make the best decision. It probably matters less in recommendation, but in cases where fraud detection, credit approval, that can be very critical. What we explain is you do not need to make all these trade-offs. You can get all these things at the same time with the context lake, with Tacnode.
Yes, without a doubt. I'm looking at, I remember, and I'm going to definitely include this in the notes for folks, but I told you this before we jumped on, is that the clarity with which you and your team write about this stuff is extraordinary. When you go to Tacnode's website, it's unbelievable how quickly you can grasp these topics and understand the problem, the solution, the value proposition, while maintaining extraordinary technical credibility in the way you describe this stuff. And I'm looking at my notes because I had pulled a number of excerpts from, and I kept saying, can you elaborate on this thought-provoking, amazing excerpt from Context Lake, the infrastructure imperative real-time AI? And one of the quotes, which I'm going to read and give you a chance to react to, is solving the context problem requires more than faster databases or smarter pipelines. It demands a fundamental rethinking of how data becomes context, a new architectural paradigm purpose-built for the age of AI inference, which I think is an exceptional statement. And my question off the back of that is, what percentage of leaders do you think are ready to have a rethink on the architectural paradigm? And how do we make sure that those that maybe quote unquote aren't, they actually are, by describing this stuff in these terms? Because I think what you're doing is you're helping people understand that this is a vastly superior, you can call it a user experience. This is a direct line to competitive advantage and revenue. And I can only imagine the way that all of this could be used for future innovation. So when you think about architectural paradigm shifts and those conversations, could you share with us a little bit of when have those conversations gone well? What's kind of the profile of the person you're talking to? And then maybe some of the stuff that's not as fun to talk about, like when it doesn't go so well, are people not understanding it? Are they not ready for it? Just help us understand a little bit of the reality of what's happening, in the actual arena as you're working through this.
Sure. Yeah. So most teams will approach this problem looking at what they have today, and they will try to solve this problem in a piecemeal fashion. So they will pick the best tool for each job and compose them together. So for example, they want real-time data, so pick a stream processor, pick the best one. The query is not fast enough, pick a good cache. And they need features, so build a feature store. They want to find items to recommend, just add a search engine. That's the most intuitive way to approach this problem. The logic is sound. You expect to get the reunion of all this capability. But what it's less obvious is that, and you don't realize when you compose these stacks together, you do compose the capabilities, you get more capabilities, but guarantees do not. That's much less obvious. A guarantee that holds inside a single system can break the moment you cross the system boundary. So I gave you an example. Consistency is such an example. When you have like 3 systems, even if each system itself is consistent, when you combine them together, they are not consistent at all, because you will be reading the systems at a slightly different timestamp. You are getting a snapshot of the world, which that never existed. This is far less obvious, and I think that's probably the biggest thing I need to explain to people why a composite stack cannot get there by tuning. The problem is not in the individual components. It's not your feature store is great, your search engine is great. Every single component is great. It's doing its job. It's doing what it's supposed to do. The problem is that when you add up these components across systems, the guarantees are not there. So what we took is a very different approach. We believe instead of composing different products in a composite stack, we should have correctness as a first principle. Design a system around what must be true at decision time, the correctness contracts, and add functionalities to it without breaking it. So one lesson we learned is when we compose the systems, you get the union of all their features, but their guarantees do not stack. They actually erode. The guarantees you end up with is usually weaker than any individual components offered. So you cannot fix that by just adding another component. That's the biggest part I need to explain to our prospects for them to understand why we cannot solve this problem in the most intuitive way by stacking things together. We need to think from first principle and solve it in a very different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one additional question, and I want to be cognizant of time here. I know you got a lot going on, but I wonder, so a very large percentage, arguably the largest percentage of my audience is in the financial services space across the spectrum. And of course, super technical folks and non-technical folks, et cetera. With whatever you're comfortable sharing, I wonder if you could speak to that audience specifically. Is there any, not case studies per se or use cases maybe would be, something you can share, but I wonder if you could specifically speak to the financial services industry or any subset of it, because I can think of several people in particular that I'm really excited for them to meet you digitally this way. And I know that they would love to hear a little bit more about any work you're able to share or work you could be doing within the financial services space that gets you excited.
Sure. Yeah, I can give some examples. The first example is apparently in the fraud detection. To detect fraud, your model need to read all kinds of data, context, raw data, what transactions you have just done, your profile data, what are the cards you have, and also velocity data. How many transactions have you done in the last 1 minute, 5 seconds? If your model reads stale velocity counters, you may end up or your model reads conflicting information. So when a transaction comes in, but you just get a new card approved, the card information is not there. Your model will not have the right data to make the decision. You may approve fraud and eat a loss. So this is going to be a P&L difference, not just a capability difference. Second use case is often happen is in credit, in buy now, pay later, such use case. At that time, when customer making a transaction, you need to make a decision if you need to approve it or not instantly. If your underwriting model sees a balance that's 3 seconds behind concurrent request, you may extend credit twice against the same exposure, and this could also end up as a loss. So these are the examples of why the most up-to-date and complete context matters to your decision and can drive real business impact.
Those are outstanding examples. One of the questions that I think people must ask you at these moments in time is taking one step back. So if a lot of the infrastructure, if not vast majority, if not all the infrastructure that was built, 4 some odd years ago, 3 years ago, et cetera, was built with humans in mind. And now we're moving very quickly to end users being AI agents and AI and the speed and the quantity and the amounts of activity that's anticipated. Is it safe to say that these concerns around fraud and credit were one thing previously, but they're an entirely different thing when we start to step into where behavior and activity is going to grow and the velocity of it as agents continue to take on more and more of a prominent role in all of this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Previously, the behavior pattern is about behavior pattern of human beings. You go to Amazon, browse it, but you can only browse so fast, and you get tired after a while. Right? So the amount of events generated by your behavior is limited by how much time you have, how fast a human acts. But with agents, imagine in the future when agents start shopping, it's going to be a totally different game. It's going to be able to do much faster than you. As a result, it will be able to generate many, many more events. To understand the behavior of agents, you need the ability to process much larger amount of data and much faster, because your decision also needs to be faster. I already talked to some people who are looking at this problem. They are looking at, try to look at the behavior pattern of agents, try to decide if this is a good agent versus bad agent or such kind of things. It's going to be much more challenging in terms of volume, in terms of freshness, and in terms of completeness. These are going to be interesting problems that we need to.
Yeah, you could say that again. All right. So last question, as always, is where and how can people find you? Anything else you want to drop in there, Xiaowei, before we kind of call it quits and let you get back to the fantastic work that you all are doing building Tacnode? Because I want to give you as much room and you can go as long as you'd like. But anything else that you'd love to share with the audience before we wrap things up, please go for it.
Sure. Yeah. So I want to add a comment. I believe AI is at the inflection point that mirrors what happens when memory becomes external and shared for human beings. Before writing was invented, every person had to rediscover everything from scratch. After writing, one person's discovery becomes everybody's capability. Knowledge compounded. Today's agents are isolated in a similar way. Each agent carries its own context. Its scope to its session, its task, its moment. When it's done, the context is gone. Next agent starts from scratch. When we build a shared context layer, this changes. One agent's discovery, a fraud pattern that keeps appearing, a customer signal that predicts churn, a route that causes delays becomes every agent's capability instantly. This compounding is what early movers actually gain. Every decision your agent makes tells you something. Which signal actually matters, which context predicted the outcome, and this accumulates. A late mover can deploy the same infrastructure a year from now, but they start with nothing. You have been accumulating for a year. So I think this is the open frontier. We are in the early days of building an agent civilization, the shared infrastructure, the patterns, and the institution knowledge of how to make agents work together at large scale. In this fast-moving landscape, start is going to be a huge win for your business. The last thing I want to add is if database gives you application shared state, context lake is going to give agents shared memory. In a compounding system, the cost of waiting is not linear. Every month you wait, the gap grows. So, and the best place to find us, you can look at us, our LinkedIn page, our YouTube, also our website at Tacnode.io.
I can tell you this, by an order of magnitude, you just crushed every single person that I've interviewed to date in terms of how powerful and awesome that statement was. You just wrote my micro essay for me. I appreciate that very much. Xiaowei, I got to tell you, I am so bullish on what you and your team are building, and I really appreciate you stopping by, and I can't wait to publish this episode. I hope you'll come back, in the not too distant future and do it again.
Thanks, Alec.
Appreciate it. Be good.
Bye.